Frank Luna, and welcome to Arizona Barrio Stories and Latino USA TV. Many of you in our audience usually see me hosting Making Space. However, today I'm here with a special installment of Arizona Barrio Stories because we're honored to welcome a special guest and a new member of our family visiting us from the great state of Texas. Selah Mota Casper, the Executive Director of Latinos in Heritage Conservation, also known as LHC. LHC is a national nonprofit organization dedicated to preserving Latinx or Latino heritage, places, and cultural contributions in the United States. Selah is a historic preservationist dedicated to advancing heritage conservation, community empowerment, and preservation equity. As Executive Director of LHC, she leads the national effort to preserve Latinx places, stories, and cultural heritage. Selah is going to discuss the work of LHC as we explore the topic, how Arizona's barrios and community stories fit into the national preservation movement. Before we start our conversation, I should clarify that we'll be referencing the terms Latinx, Latino, and Chicano throughout the interview. While we realize that individuals may prefer one term over another based on personal identity, for the purposes of our discussion, we will be using them interchangeably in referencing the Latino culture. Selah, welcome to Arizona Barrio Stories. It's an honor to have you join us today.
Thank you, Frank. It's an honor to be here with you.
How was your trip arriving from the great state of Texas?
Amazing, and I'm loving this weather here.
Yeah,
Great welcome.
We ordered it special for you.
I appreciate that.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
No scorching heat yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, not yet. Okay, well, let's get started. Selah, the national preservation movement has a long history in this country, reaching as far back as the early 19th century. According to research, Selah, tell us what happened in 2014 that ignited the call to action that resulted in what today is Latinos in Heritage Conservation.
Great question. So in 2013, 2012, there was a lot of movement going on within the United States and trying to diversify and just trying to tell more stories within historic preservation as it relates to Black and Brown communities. And so that was at the federal level happening. We had then Secretary of the Interior, Ken Salazar, was there, and he initiated a lot of these different campaigns to try to unearth these stories. So LGBTQIA, they did a theme study around that. And then also, there was a women's movement that began to move around that. And thankfully, one around the Latino theme studies. So there was a lot happening, a lot of really great synergy that was occurring. And I think it was just a moment in preservation where people were pausing and truly recognizing that our stories weren't being told. And because of that, many of us, and during that time I was in graduate school, and many of us were working in these silos, really thinking about Latino preservation within the United States and how we could work either independently or jointly. And so we all got connected in 2014 and started just networking and talking to one another. And there was about 12 of us that were there and started on these phone calls in 2014. And it just grew and grew. And everywhere that we went to, we found new individuals like yourself that are doing great work throughout the country. And our networks began to grow. And so we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary. We're now 11 years old. Thank you. We're preteens, but yeah, we are very excited and just very humbled by just how much we've grown. And to think back when we started out with just a dozen people to now, our conferences or our reach is pretty incredible. And I think it just speaks to the necessity and the desire for people to want to tell their stories and for individuals like myself wanting to preserve these stories as well.
And thank goodness for the work that you started, you and your colleagues, I should say, because the timing couldn't be better, as they say. Selah, why is preserving Latinx history and landmarks across the country important, especially now more than ever?
It is so important. To date, LHC just finished an equity study, and this equity study went through and we did a survey throughout the country to see how many Latinx sites were listed in the National Register of Historic Places. And what we found was that only 0.65% of sites are associated with Latino history. So that means less than 1% of all of the sites listed in the National Register through the National Park Service, well, less than 1% tell the story of Latinos. And so it's just a travesty that really hasn't moved much. 10 years ago, I did a similar survey and found the same thing. At that point in time, it was 0.11. So while it has gone up, and that is promising and wonderful, there's not enough that's being done. And unfortunately, when you don't have a site that's designated in most cities throughout the country, then what it does is if you're not designated at the national level or local level especially, then you can just deal with a lot of different regulatory issues and the sites aren't protected and we see demolitions that occur. And so historic designation is a really, really important step in just trying to keep our places, standing, trying to tell our stories through these locations or cultural landscapes. But it's especially important, one, because that's just the trajectory of how we've gone. And so there are individuals and individuals and organizations like LHC that are working to uncover these stories. But also, especially today, whenever we hear that our stories aren't important, when we hear that there are particular organizations or histories are being shunned and therefore removed, and funding for these types of organizations and for these types of storytelling are being removed, it just makes our work even more important right now.
Absolutely. Now, the percentage you mentioned, that's an alarming rate. To give our audience an example, the National Register, what kind of sites, off the top of your head, are included in the National Register? I just want to give a comparison.
Absolutely. So like in New Mexico, the governor's mansion is National Register, and I believe it's also a National Historic Landmark. But traditionally, there are sites that are designated at the local, state, and federal level. It can be a site that's associated, usually, it'll be, let's say, a home of an individual that was like a prominent civil rights activist, things like that. So there are sites that we recognize to be historically or culturally significant, and sites that we want to make sure those stories are preserved, and then we can list them in this federal registry at those various levels. But like I said, the biggest thing with it is for Latinx communities, especially our historic barrios, is that we get designated so we can help to protect the local and, at the local and neighborhood level, especially against displacement and gentrification. It's just a really great tool to have in your pocket.
And it speaks to the need for LHC
Absolutely.
organizations, Arizona Barrio Stories at its heart is a storytelling format, and we share that in common with LHC. How do you see Arizona's barrios and community fitting into the national preservation movement, and more specifically, the work of LHC?
Barrio Stories absolutely resonates with LHC. We believe in a community-led historic preservation, which is a very different way of looking at historic preservation. Traditionally, it's a very top-down type of movement where we have individuals with PhDs telling stories, but we don't ever really hear the stories of the communities on the ground, those that actually experienced something like the oral history of a bracero. Previously, that is something that would not have been captured. But now with organizations like LHC and so many things that are moving throughout the country and just being very community focused, we're beginning to hear a lot of these stories, these firsthand stories that were never documented or taken. And we also get to peek into history and see different angles and look at things in different ways than we ever have previously. So your work absolutely resonates with the work that we do because that's what we support. We always say that LHC, our audience is comunidad, and that's our number one audience, and that's who we work for, that's who we work with, and that's who we want to support. So it's organizations like you all throughout the country that we're just so lucky to be able to support and work with. A lot of times people will call us for technical things like historic preservation, like we were just discussing, or how do I take an oral history? How do I do this work? So that very much resonates with our work, with our Abuelas project specifically. And then nationally, there's a really big movement trying to just be able to democratize history. So many of our history, so many of our historical sites and so much of our history has yet to be told. And there's lots of historians and public historians, anthropologists, community leaders, elders that are doing super great work and beginning to think about how we as a nation can do this work.
That's very, very necessary, as you talk about. And LHC is such a tremendous conduit for those local stories.
Thank you.
You're mentioning. Now, as we wrap up, how can everyday community members in our audience get involved in protecting and celebrating their heritage? And I understand that you just launched a tremendous new initiative.
We did. So we just launched one of our programs, which is Nuestra Herencia, and it's our grant program, which is incredible. So there's lots of things from grants that you can seek out to try to do special projects, incredible projects at the community level, like the work that you all are doing with Barrio Stories. But there's also just, if you're sitting down with your abuelita, take out your phone and hit record and just start asking her questions. Ask her, if she migrated here, when she came, why she came, what was that journey like? Ask her, what that was like coming and not speaking, a primary language, and get to know them in a different way and make sure that you capture it, even on audio. Every phone can record now, thankfully. So it makes community level historic preservation very easy and very accessible. So I always start out with that, like, take the stories, write it down, let's document it and make sure that it's preserved somewhere on your computer, on your phone, all the way up to being able to work with your local city governments, like the historic designations that we were talking about. You can work with them so that way then we can recognize your history and also get your sites historically designated and protected. And so that's another different route. So there's lots of community ways, and then there's also more traditional ways that you can then work with historic preservation.
Wonderful. Well, in closing, I do want to share that Arizona Barrio Stories has already released this to the social media sites. We are very pleased and proud to be in recipient of one of the Nuestra Herencia grants that Selah has been discussing. So it's very thrilling, and it's going to help us advance your work at the national level and bring it down to the grassroots level and help us strengthen our roots here locally. So Selah, muchas gracias, and thank you for embracing us as part of your familia, and the feeling is likewise.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, and congratulations. We look forward to partnering with you.
Thank you, and thank you again for coming out today.
My pleasure.
Folks, that's it for today's edition of Arizona Barrio Stories, and please look for us for the next time.